Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in today with us. I have a amazing guest and friend, Danielle Mednoza, and she is a wife, mom, podcast host, international best-selling author, and business development consultant. Inside her Confident Concept Legacy Project Accelerator, she's helping brilliant and busy women create a high-level strategy for bringing their dream project out of their head and into the world in just 90 days. Danielle is committed to helping women create a lasting legacy by expanding their impact through a podcast, book, or certification course. She's also founded Be Myself Now, so women who are newer to business can lay a strong foundation for organic growth with one-on-one support inside her new Be Development program. After facing curable but stubborn skin cancer, she realized her calling was to make sure women have a chance to help real people by sharing their gifts and talents before leaving this earth. When she's not bringing big ideas to life, you can find Danielle homeschooling her two kids, hanging out with her cats, doing yoga or Pilates, traveling with her husband, or trying a new restaurant with friends. So Danielle, that was a lot. So much to dive into, and thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Emma. I really appreciate it. I'm excited.
So let's start with, how did you get to where you are? What led you to wanting to help women with either a podcast, book, or certification course? And what led to the Accelerator project specifically? And then we can jump to newbie development because I do know I've seen you and your co-founder post a lot about this, so I'm excited to talk about it as well. We'll go into that next.
Yeah, I mean, my story, like all of ours, it goes way back, right?
It goes way back.
I got my start as an entrepreneur pretty early on. As a kid, I was like, okay, how can we make some money for the ice cream man? And I would like sell old Halloween candy door to door to make money for the ice cream man in like January. It was Southern California, so the ice cream man still came around in January. But yeah, it was. I mean, I think back on that, I'm like, it's so silly. But at the same time, it's that spirit of like, what value can I trade other people for monetary value? And that's what entrepreneurship's all about. And then in college, I studied lighting design, and the lighting design world is very much an entrepreneurial world. You have to land your own contracts on different shows. And when that show's over, you got to find another show, and just you kind of bounce around in that way. And then I stepped into corporate America because I was like, well, I need something stable. I kind of like believed that story that we're all fed of this is the better way, this will make more sense. And I worked for a great construction company, but then during the early 2009 part of the downturn, I was laid off while I was 12 weeks pregnant. So it was really, really shocking. And it made me realize that this stable thing that we're all kind of relying on is actually not that stable at all. And sometimes the most stability can be found in making our own decisions and taking our own action. So I decided that I would stay home with my kids. I had the opportunity to sort of reevaluate. We figured out a way to live off of one income, and I stayed home with my babies. I had a second child a couple years later, and while I was 4 months pregnant with him, I found out that I had basal cell skin cancer, and that was really a shock. And I was in shock about it for years. And it didn't really wake me up fully until about 5 years later, after struggling to cure it in the normal ways didn't work, and they removed a third of my top lip. And in that time, I was really feeling like being just a mom wasn't enough for me. And that's not to say that motherhood isn't important. It absolutely is. But I needed something more than that. I realized that I was being called to share more of myself in the world than just with my family. And so I started getting my business management and marketing certification because I was always interested in business. And then I was a copywriter for a couple of years. I could write during nap time and after bedtime and just make some pocket money. And then that sort of fizzled away. It's funny, I don't really have like an exact end date for that. I just sort of like stopped taking projects at one point because I was pretty busy with the kids, and we bought a house and we moved. And then I hit my low point when I had that surgery, and I was just quite honestly struggling with suicidal ideation. Not that I ever had any intention of that, but just struggling with these really strong thoughts, and struggling with this idea of what am I really doing here? What is going on in life? Like, what is this all about?
Right.
And it took me some time to realize that I'm here to help lift up other people. And we could always die, I mean, that's kind of morbid, but it's the truth. Like, there's always a risk of something happening. And so facing the cancer just made me wake up to that reality a little bit more and made me
Yep.
decide that I was going to live my life on purpose with a lot more intention. So I went through some really powerful coaching programs, kind of got my head on straight a little bit. And then I got started as a teen coach, and I was coaching teenagers with life coaching. And that was really fantastic. I enjoyed it a lot. And through the process of that, then I ended up spiritually coaching women, which was a really unique experience as well. But in both of those businesses, some of the most common questions I would get would be, "Oh, you have a podcast. How'd you do that?" Or, "Hey, I see you have a really nice website. How did you make that?" And always the questions came back to the business stuff. And I realized that's sort of where my zone of genius lies, is in the business strategy, in setting up a business, laying it out, figuring out the actual pieces that we might need, because sometimes we think we need a lot more than we actually do.
Yeah.
And I realized that encouraging other women to share their gifts and talents through a business was something that I was really driven to do. And I started working with a multi six figure brand on developing their coaching certification and their business builder course. And then I was teaching in that business builder course. And I had these women saying to me, like, "Well, do I have to be on social media? Do I have to
Right.
do it this way?" And honestly, I looked at them and I was like, honestly, no, you don't have to do anything that's in this program. Which I felt kind of bad saying because I helped develop that program. But at the same time, it's true. What's social media for? It's for visibility. There are ways
Yep.
to get visibility that don't have you plastered all over social media if that's not what you want to do.
That is
So,
a huge conversation. I feel like that is also happening again now. Like, I feel like a few years back, like when I first started, that was like the big push was you have to be on social media. There was no other way. You had to live launch, no other way. And now if that's the conversation of people just wanting to get off social media for
yeah.
it.
I think we
So,
all belong to way too many Facebook groups. So this idea of like start a Facebook group and get your business going that way is kind of dying out. I mean, that's not to say that it can't work for some people, but if you're not already a person who's like thriving on social media because you just love it, and I mean personally thriving, I don't mean the
oh yeah,
followers or the engagement, but if you make a reel and you feel on fire because you just love making reels, go make reels. Go make all the reels. Like that probably will work for your business. If you feel on fire to show up in a Facebook group and lead people that way, do it, but
right.
it doesn't mean you have to. And chances are good it's not going to work for the people who are trying to force it. And that's when I realized that in business, we need a much more personalized approach. There's a lot
Oh
of cookie cutter programs out there, and they're designed to teach us what worked for that guru of a person who's leading that
oh yeah,
program. And it's discouraging to some people because they feel like they can't do it. They feel like, oh, I'm supposed to get to six figures as like the bare minimum of success, which I think is a total lie. I think that's something we've got to let go of. Four figures in the positive can be success, you guys. A
oh
lot
yeah.
of this is revenue numbers too. And no one's really sharing their profit, which like I wish people would share their profit more
That
because I think that's a bigger number that matters more in terms of our back end. But
yeah.
I just decided I wanted to give people a way to get that personalized help. And so that's when the Be Myself Now newbie development program started. I started working one on one with women who wanted to build a business that would allow them to thrive in their life alongside their business, that they wouldn't have to ditch their kids and ditch their husband and ditch all their other obligations to just work 24/7 and hustle harder and all these things that we've sort of been told. And it was going really great, but it was developed for women who were newer to business. And I was getting a lot of questions like, "Well, I know you don't do this, but can you help me figure out how to put my book together? Because I know you wrote a book." Or, "Can you help me develop this podcast?" And those were coming from more established women business owners. And they knew that I worked with newbies, but they're like, "Maybe you can help me develop this thing." And that's when Confident Concept Legacy Project Accelerator was born, because so
I
many of
love
us
the
are
name.
experts. Thank you so much. We are experts at what we do, and we do it really well, and we've built this thriving business. But the idea of expanding our impact through a book, podcast, or certification course is exciting. but it feels really
Yeah.
impossible. We're like, we don't know how to do that. And so it just sits on the back burner. And it's something that I'm quite good at developing. And so I decided to build out a framework and make that a new offer. And it's been going really well.
Can you talk a little bit about the framework inside of the accelerator? I'm imagining that there's the stages, but then there's also the imposter syndrome that comes up. So, what kind of things do you ladies, I should say, address in the accelerator program?
Yeah, so it's a one-on-one VIP program. So it's 90 days and you get 3 VIP sessions that are each 30 days apart. And the first one is
Okay.
focused on laying out the high-level project strategy. What does it actually look like to build out that project? And what are the
Mm,
elements that they really need? I think often it feels daunting to do something new because we don't know what we don't know. And it
oh
takes a
yeah.
ton of time and research, and busy women don't have time for all of that. So I save them that headache. I give them an exact plan for what they need to do to make it happen. And then, yeah, we discussed this idea of like, okay, when are you actually going to sit down and write? Like, it's great. We've got a framework for your book. I help them build out their chapter framework to make it really easy to get it written, but you still have to commit to doing the thing, right? And that can be
Yeah.
really scary. So we take a dive into like what are they thinking about and what are they feeling about the project and how can we address that? And then, like, when is the best time? Sometimes at different times of day, we're on fire, and other parts of the day, we're like really doubting ourselves. So don't
Yeah.
save your writing for those parts of the day where you're just not feeling it. Make sure you set aside the time when you are on fire. And so we build out that schedule for them as well. And then the second VIP day is focused on a launch strategy. And the third one is
Okay.
focused on what I call evergreen monetization because these projects can be utilized over and over again. You can leverage them for years to come.
Yes, that is so true because there's a lot of ways to evergreen that content since you have so much of it already written within the book, chunking that out and then using SEO friendly or organic reach ways, not just social media, to have that going. Now, do they usually, when they come to you, is it just the book or is the book and the podcast more and the certification course more of lead into something else? Is that what they are their goals are, or is it to really just have their message out in the world, or is it like split? Sorry, if anyone's listening, you can hear Lila in the background. She's talking to
Yeah,
me.
that's motherhood and entrepreneurship at its finest. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, so when they come to me, it's usually this idea of wanting to get their project going and get it out in the world, but they also want a return on their investment. They're smart
Right.
businesswomen. They understand that there needs to be a return for the amount of time, effort, and money spent to create these projects. And I really have the magic of being able to marry the two. So
Right.
I recently had an author enter the program and she was like, I've got an idea of sort of like some memoir stories, but I also know it should be like my business information. And those feel like two separate things. And I'm like, no, actually, they're not because you want to share your business information, but nobody wants a book where they're just like information's being vomited at them all the time. They want stories. We're human beings. We want to
Yep.
hear stories. We want to relate to people. So it really is a beautiful mix of a memoir of stories and,
Yeah.
examples that make sense, that share that bigger message and those methods and processes that are within the business. And, none of these projects are inherently revenue generating, except for maybe a certification course, because that is like a new offer. But a
Yeah.
podcast, a book, those don't bring in revenue directly. What it does is it
Right.
expands your reach and allows people to get to know you and get to know what you offer and decide whether or not that's right for them. So we really make sure we build out the books and the podcasts in a way that bring people into that client pathway so that you can nurture them to a closed sale.
Right. Yeah. Because it's and those are so different, like you mentioned, avenues for businesses to build that like expert positioning and get that visibility because obviously a book, you kind of have to just do the work up front and then piece it out and evergreen it. With podcast, you're kind of having to create more content going forward. And I actually just saw a post yesterday talking about I don't know what your thoughts are if you've heard this because you're in the podcast world more than I am. But that podcasts are turning into, or people are turning their podcasts into more of a video series. And like, really just putting them on YouTube. They're not really podcasts anymore, but they called it a video podcast. I'm like, well, that's just really YouTube, but, or, whatever platform they're putting it on. But I just thought that was interesting. I don't see podcasts going anywhere. I feel like they still are a great way to build that visibility. Lila, oh my gosh, sorry. I don't know if you've heard of anything like that or seen anything with that.
So video podcasts really started to take off probably about 3 years ago was when it really started to become a strong avenue, and it's been growing, obviously. And it's funny because I tend to agree. I'm like, that's just a YouTube channel, and then you're pulling the audio, making a podcast from it, which is essentially what it is. And what's nice is you're sort of killing two birds with one stone. You're repurposing the time spent on that content, being able to make it a video for those who want to consume via video, which is really popular. Video is kind of king right now on social media. So it can be a really strong way to do it, because then you can break down that video into short clips that you can use as reels or TikToks, even to be shared on Facebook, or you can pull that audio, create headliner type. I don't know if you've seen the Headliner app, but it's like those audiograms where it's the image and then it's got the waveform on it and the sound is being shared. And you can sort of do all of these things with that same piece of content. So it's really powerful because it saves you the time of having to then create multiple pieces of content for the different ways that people want to consume it. So you're able to spread it out over to like 12 different places and target everyone. Because in truth, people see about 6% of what you put out there. And so when you can put it out in many different ways, then it can serve you really well. But the only caveat, I think, is like anything else in business, you've got to really enjoy it.
Right.
There's a lot of women who don't want to show up on video. And I'm like, then don't. Just get a microphone and start talking. Or if you don't want to talk, but you feel comfortable writing, start a blog. Blogs are not dead. They're great, powerful tools for SEO. You can bring in a lot of people to share your information and share about yourself through a blog. And all of those things can be repurposed into your email marketing campaigns. Exactly. There's kind of like 100 ways to repurpose each piece of content. And it really boils down to doing what you feel excited about and what you feel the most comfortable with. But yeah, those video podcasts have definitely been growing. And I think it's because of that repurposing capability and how many different places that content can go.
Oh yeah. There's a less new need for like new content almost, because you don't have to think of 5 social posts for the week, or how am I going to get people found? If you put it out there and have your lead magnet or your newsletter or anything, they can stay in touch with you and get subscribed. And like a couple of my clients, we set up, they released their podcast and with like the email platform ConvertKit, and I know a couple other places are doing this. Oh my God, she's so talkative right now. You can set up with your RSS feed so that like it'll just automatically email people to like notify them of when your podcast is out and what the topic is and all of that fun stuff that you can do to make it easier for people to access the information without having to create a ton of extra work for you as the business owner or the content creator as well. I love that you bring up and I feel like people get stuck here is when you say doing what really makes them happy. Do you find that the women that you work with, like obviously that's a struggle, finding out what you want to do that makes you happy, because sometimes it's not intuitive, I feel like. So since you went through this journey and you had so many iterations of like where you were, what kind of helped you find and really pinpoint what truly lit you up? And how many, because I love asking the hard like the questions that people don't really as often ask, like how many times did you think you had it and then like moved on to something else or pivoted into something else? Because that's not talked about enough, in my opinion.
A bajillion. Yeah. If that was a number, that's the number I would choose.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I think we're always a work in progress. And I think the first step to finding like what lights you up, what makes you happy, is to really get in alignment with yourself. It's one thing to push through fear and to push through imposter syndrome and to push past some of these uncomfortable emotions of just like stretching outside your comfort zone, because that is necessary. But it's another thing to do something that really brings up strong resistance in you. So you've got to get to know the difference between fear and imposter syndrome and discomfort and that strong resistance that's saying, no, no, this is not for me. This is not aligned with me. And then once you're aligned, taking action from that place and finding out what works for your audience. Who
Yeah.
really is your ideal person, and do they like when you put out a video podcast? Maybe they don't. Maybe they're busy and they don't want anything to do with that, and they just want to read a blog because they consume
Yeah.
content at night in bed after their kids are asleep. It really just depends. And maybe
I
they
had
would love a video podcast if there was captions that they could read in quiet, right? So it's
right.
playing with those things and experimenting to find what works for you and what works for your audience. And then that's where the magic happens.
I had someone who switched, so they would send out their email but they included an audio clip of her reading the email so that if you don't want to read the whole thing,
Brilliant.
you could just play it in the background. So it's like playing with those little things of not only what do you want to do as the business owner, but what does my audience want? Because we could want to do something, but then no one else is on board. It's like a trial and error situation of, I feel like I've been tweaking my VIP day forever. Ever since I like let it out, it's always a tweak or a work in progress, or especially for service providers, it's always tweaking the offer as any entrepreneur does. So it's never,
Yeah. The
fully
offer and the
done.
process.
Yeah.
It definitely takes time to figure those out, and you learn more the more clients you work with. And obviously, if you're just starting out, you maybe worked with 3 people and you're like, oh, it seems like this is what people had trouble with the most or what they liked the most. And then you work with 5 more people, and those next 5 people felt differently than those first 3.
Yep.
Or you work with 10 people and you're like, wow, I really didn't enjoy working with these people quite as much as I thought I would. And then you can either shift your offer, or you can say, like, what's in my messaging that's drawing these people in instead of the
Yep.
people I would rather work with. So there's a lot of different angles to kind of come at it from. But I say it boils down to what I call the action formula. You've got to take
Okay.
actions. You've got to try something, but then you've got to observe it. You've got to observe it honestly and see, how are they responding? How are you responding? And then you've got to adjust it, and then you've got to repeat. And if you move through that formula throughout your business history, you'll end up with a business that looks like you planned it perfectly. 10 years
Yeah.
from now, it'll look like you're the next overnight success and you planned it out perfectly. You knew exactly what people wanted and what you wanted. And I mean, that's never true. We're always stumbling forward through it.
I was gonna say, you mean there's no such thing as an overnight success story? What? Like, I feel like everyone gets, especially newer entrepreneurs, always think that like, oh, they did it. They like no one researches or sees the failures that have occurred, or not even failures, because I don't like to say it as a failure. It was like you said, you took action, you learned, and you observed. You're not beating yourself up over it. You're not, making yourself feel bad, like, oh, this didn't work. It's being rational and taking a step back and saying, okay, why isn't this working? Or what could I have done in a different way? Or, just actually taking an evaluation with the offer or the strategy that you've put in place. And that's a lot of things I work with my clients on. But from an internal operations spaces, okay, what do we need to tweak? And so many people come to me and they're like, well, I want to do this now or overnight. And I'm like, that's not how this works. And you're going to create a lot of issues, if you just expect expect the success, and you've never tested it, you don't have market research, you've never launched it, you've never talked about it. It's usually offers that we're talking about. And I'm like, well, I want you to have a realistic point of view for this. And so I think that action formula is such a good point, for anyone listening. They like write that down, just take it to heart. One takeaway, at least take away that it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to move forward, and try something. Like, like Danielle said, she was in so many different roles. She was a copywriter, and now she is where she is, and you never would have got there had you not tested and tried all those other avenues. I would imagine.
Exactly. No, exactly. And there's nothing to feel bad about either
Right.
in trying all those different things. I think some people might feel nervous to say, well, I did this and then I did that and then I was this and now I'm that and now I'm showing up as this. Each one of those informs the next step, and each one
Oh
of
yeah.
those helps you learn something that makes you better at what it is that you do right now.
Yep.
Our whole path is something that leads to the current moment. And so don't be ashamed. I think sometimes we read these biographies of really successful people and we think like, wow, they knew what to do at every turn. They had
Yeah.
no idea. They were just as lost as you are. I guarantee it. I mean,
Yep.
it's just the human way. And I think what you said about tempering expectations is so important. I think sometimes we have an expectation of, well, I know who my person is and I've developed great messaging and I've got this awesome offer and I know it can help them. And now I'll just sit back and wait for the people to roll in. And that
Oh
is
yeah.
just not how this works. We have got to put ourselves out there. We've got to touch base with people, form real relationships, and make that invitation for them to work with us. I think a great example is Zig Ziglar, the speaker. I don't know if any of you have heard of him. He's a
I have
really
not.
famous motivational speaker from the 90s. He's since passed, but his talks are really well known in some circles and just super inspiring. So you can check him out if you want.
Oh, I have to check
But
them out.
Zig Ziglar talks about how for the first 15 years of his speaking career, not one person reached out to him to come speak. He had to reach out to every single organization, event, anytime that he wanted to be on stage. He had to reach out and introduce himself and make it known that he wanted to be on that stage. 15 years. I mean, that is a long time.
That's a
And when we
long
think of
time.
Zig Ziglar, if you do know who he is, you're like, everybody wants Zig Ziglar. He's in high demand. And he was in high demand by the end of his speaking career, but it took a long time to get to that point where people were reaching out for him. So just remember that. Just, accept that you're going to have to go out there and you're going to have to kind of chase it down, and I don't mean to make it sound so aggressive. It doesn't need to be. It really is natural relationship forming and making invitations. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's something that you've got to be proactive about.
You really do, and you have to just accept the journey that you're gonna go on. Like, um, you're everyone tries to rush it, or they see and compare with someone else who maybe you weren't there. And being someone who works in a lot of businesses inside their businesses, um, it is definitely rosier on the outside than it is on the inside. For so many businesses,
That's a great
I
point.
I have worked with coaches or program creators or course creators who, from the outside it looks shiny, great, but on the inside maybe there's something they're struggling with even then. And I feel like a lot of us, and this is me included, I think, what is this secret thing for six? Yeah, are you telling me the secret? The secret is yeah.
She's got the secret.
She's got the secret. I'm like, what is this secret? What is this thing to get me to six figures or above, or like whatever revenue goal it is that I'm trying to hit at the time? And it's like every time I've gotten there, it's just listening to what I want, what my audience wants, and just trusting. You have to like trust yourself and trust,
Mhm.
just like you mentioned before, keep it consistent. You're just showing up, being there for your people. Doesn't matter about people who are outside of your not your network, but the people that are not your people, because not everyone's gonna like you. You're not everyone's cup of tea.
Yeah.
That's okay.
We're going after 10% of the market. I mean, some of the most successful businesses speak to 10% of the overall market. And so it's really important to keep that in mind. We're not trying to please everyone, we're not trying to bring everyone in.
Yep.
Your specific person is specific for a reason. And so
Yep.
you've got to let go of this idea of pleasing everyone, speaking universally in terms, you want your marketing to repel at least 50% of people so that you're starting to draw in that 10% who is like, yes, this person gets it. They've got what I need. Let's go. And so,
Yep.
don't be afraid to make people say like, oh, that doesn't make sense, or oh, that's not for me. Like every time you get one of those responses, be like, great. Is this my ideal person? If yes, maybe tweak what you're doing. If not, say thank you and move on, because that means it's working. So, don't
Yep.
listen to your Aunt Sally. Chances are good Aunt Sally is not your ideal client. Listen to your ideal client.
Exactly. Exactly. That is so good. And that is so true. I am so glad we went down this rabbit hole of, talking about just consistency and showing up for your audience. Is there anything else you want to share with us about, you know, oh, we didn't even talk about your new bee development, or is that
I kind of touched on that earlier. Yeah, that's the one for women who are newer to business, just
that's
helping them
separate
get
from?
things straight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we did talk about that. I'm like, why? Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Um, anyone listening, she is just a chatty Cathy, and I know where she gets it from. Because I will chat with you all day if I could, because these are such great topics and conversations. For anybody who is interested in writing a book or starting a podcast or just learning more about you, where could they connect or find you?
Yeah, if you're a multi six figure business owner and you're interested in developing that high level strategy, you can find me at confidentconcept.com or on Instagram at confident.concept. But if you're newer to business and you're thinking about getting your feet wet with a book or a podcast, or you just need some help around like your business model or who is your ideal person, who should you actually be
Right.
listening to, then you can find me at bemyselfnow.com or on Instagram at bemyself.now.
And these also will be um, down linked in the caption down below, so you guys can find her there as well. And thank you so much, Danielle, for joining me today. Anything else before we sign off?
One last thing I want to share is the business development triangle. Whether you're new or you're established, anytime you take on a new project or start a new business, you have to keep in mind that there are three qualities that are really important, and those are time, quality, and money spent. And you usually get the
Yep.
positives from two corners of the triangle, and you trade off for a negative in the third. So if you want it done fast and high quality, it's going to be more expensive. If you want it done cheap and high quality, it's going to take more time. So that'll help you temper those expectations as well.
That is so good. Yes, that is so true. I've never heard of that, but I'm glad you did, because I've like know the concepts within, like, if you want it done quick, you're gonna have to pay. But I didn't know that there was like a whole concept behind it. So that's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great. I really appreciate your time. And thanks everyone for listening and watching. And I hope to be in touch with you soon.
Thank you so much, Danielle.